erratic in the skies. They witnessed a very rare daytime fireball that was so intense that it triggered a sonic boom over both countries. The sonic boom was so loud that it was heard all the way from southwest England to the north of France. In fact, the boom was so intense that people thought there were fighter jets streaking across the skies above them. It was the Ministry of Defense who quickly came forward and announced there were no jets that day. It wasn't until later that satellite images confirmed a massive fireball meteor had broken apart in the atmosphere, creating one of the biggest fireballs ever seen in modern times. This wasn't just an ordinary meteor, though. It was what scientists call a fireball meteor. According to Live Science, a fireball meteor almost always emits light either equal to or greater than Venus seen in the sky at night. Fireballs burn this bright because of how fast they're going, usually going faster than the speed of sound. This is how they create a sonic boom before ultimately breaking apart. Also because of how big they are. Most fireballs come from parent asteroids that are, at a minimum, 3.3 feet or 1 meter across. According to the AMS, as meteors hit the planet's atmosphere, it slows down due to friction and heats up, releasing energy in the form of visible light. Number 9. Frozen iguanas. Only in Florida could a falling iguana alert be issued. The alert warned residents to be on the lookout for lizards literally dropping out of the sky. These alerts are activated only when the temperature gets so cold that iguanas slip into a state of dormancy. Any iguana that happens to be in a tree when the temperature gets so cold will fall off a branch and go crashing to the ground. This results in frozen iguanas literally raining down from above. And of course, the last thing anyone wants during the Christmas season is a frozen iguana knocking them in the head. Luckily, these iguanas aren't actually dead. They go into a kind of suspended animation and should absolutely not be touched or bothered when found on the ground. As soon as the sun rays come back out and the weather heats up, the iguanas will go back to their business and climb up their trees again. This usually happens in January when temperatures dip into the 30s Fahrenheit. Usually there's no damage caused by the lizards, except for one case in 2017 when a photographer had an iguana smash through his van's windshield. The iguana hit the windshield so hard that it snapped out of its dormant state and ran away. Number 8. UFO over Hawaii. A mysterious blue UFO has been spotted over Hawaii, with the entire thing being captured on video. This happened as recently as December 29th, 2020. As if the year couldn't get any worse, the sightings of the UFO prompted fears of an alien invasion. Eyewitnesses discovered the strange spacecraft hovering in the night sky on the Hawaiian island of Oahu. It was so obviously a UFO that people panicked and started calling 911. In the video footage taken of the unidentified flying object, a glowing blue form is visibly hanging out in the sky. It moved across the clouds and eventually crashed into the sea without making a sound. One eyewitness told Hawaii News Now that she even saw a second UFO appear. This one wasn't blue though. It was white and followed the same direction as the first one before eventually disappearing. The Federal Aviation Administration was quick to rule out a crashed aircraft. Nobody could say for certain what these terrifying objects were. Some claimed that the floating blue object could have been an LED kite. But what about the second one? What do you think? Can we chalk these sightings up to glowing kites, or should Hawaii be worried about alien invaders? Number 7. Waterspouts. Waterspouts are a fantastic phenomenon most people never get to see in their life. And yet, residents off the coast in Louisiana witnessed on August 20th, 2020, 6 waterspouts funneling from the sea to the sky in the Gulf of Mexico. Waterspouts are basically water tornadoes. They appear very rarely, and there's usually only one of them at a time. But this incident had 6 spinning all at once, making it look as though the world were about to end as spinning water tornadoes sped towards the shore. Waterspouts are generally rated as EF0 tornadoes, meaning they are actually quite weak. They only produce winds up to 85 miles per hour. But how does a waterspout form in the sky? Well, they are really just rotating columns of air that form over water. They don't actually suck any water. They definitely spray a lot of water around, but waterspouts are more like optical illusions created by air vortexes. The most waterspouts ever witnessed at the same time were 9 on the surface of Lake Michigan. Have you ever been lucky enough to see a water spout? If so, where did you see it? Let me know in the comments section below. And while you're at it, go ahead and like this video and hit that subscribe button too. Number 6. A winged monster. Disturbing images of a monster creature with wings leaping between the trees has once again sparked fears that the legendary Mothman is back. For those of you who don't know, the Mothman is supposedly a monster that looks kind of like a human, but has large moth-like wings, and he's often spotted flying through the trees of West Virginia. The Mothman was first spotted in November of 1966 by gravediggers in Point Pleasant. There were further sightings all the way up until 1967, when 46 people died on the Silver Bridge, following a string of eyewitness accounts. Rumor has it that the Mothman is the sinister harbinger of doom! These most recent photographs came from a man in Point Pleasant. He discovered what almost looked like a man in a wingsuit flying through the darkness. He immediately sent the pictures to a local news outlet, and the rumors quickly spread that Mothman had returned to West Virginia. It definitely wasn't a giant bat. Is it possible that it could have been an owl or a different bird carrying off a snake or some other prey? So far as West Virginia residents are concerned, this creature is definitely the Mothman. Number 5. Blood rain. Sometimes, blood falls from the sky. In ancient times, people used to associate experiencing droplets of blood falling from above as signs of the apocalypse. In fact, incidents of blood rain have been reported as far back as the 8th century BCE. But what causes blood to literally rain down from the heavens? Blood rain is actually caused by dust and sand from the Sahara Desert. It's a type of weather phenomenon in which red dust and sand mixes with precipitation, and then what falls is red rain. Dust can blow as far as 2,500 miles or 4,023 kilometers from Africa, where it reaches Europe in places like the United Kingdom, Spain, and the south of France. It then falls in heavy droplets of crimson liquid. In Kerala, back in 2015, blood rain occurred because spores of green microalgae were moved through the atmosphere by clouds and blown across the earth on trade winds, mixing with the rain and falling as blood. Lucky for us, blood rain does not actually mean the end of the world is nigh. If you discover a bloody rain of terror spilling from the clouds, don't panic. Have you ever been bloody rained on? Number 4. Lights in the sky. In Australia, residents were terrified when they looked up at the night sky to discover what appeared to be a train of bizarre alien lights glowing in a perfect line across the empty sky. Someone even tweeted, "Please tell me that the long strain of lights in the sky moving fast over the Central West was some kind of military exercise flying in formation. Does Australia have 30-odd aircraft in the RAF that would fly closely together, evenly spaced in a line at 5 a.m.? Just for fun?" Sorry to burst your bubble. While these strange lights may have appeared to be part of an extraterrestrial invasion or some kind of glitch in the Matrix, they were actually just satellites. The lights in the sky made up a line of about 60 satellites. Unsurprisingly, the satellites belong to Elon Musk. Apparently, Musk has been launching dozens of satellites at a time as part of his Starlink project, something that is going to deliver high-speed internet to some of the most remote places in the world. His plan is to actually have what is basically a train of tiny satellites at very low orbit across the atmosphere, raining down affordable internet on everyone. According to ABC News, there are so far over 1,200 satellites in orbit, with plans of launching perhaps 30,000 more. Number 3. The Monster Star. Back in 2019, scientists witnessed an event unlike any other. They looked into the sky and discovered a giant star that they claim to be 2.5 million times brighter than our sun. Just try to imagine a star over 2 million times brighter than our own sun. Pluto would melt, and you would be turned to ash in seconds. The real mystery is where the star went after it was discovered. According to a new paper published in Royal Astronomical Society, the best theory scientists have is that the enormous star collapsed and turned into a black hole without exploding into a supernova first. though nobody can say just how in the universe that happened. Jose Grove from the Trinity College Dublin called it one of the most massive stars present in our local universe. It was located about 75 million light years from us. If true, this would be the first direct detection of such a monster star ending its life in this manner. Andrew Allen, study lead author and also of Trinity College, said in the statement. Number 2. Snake eel. In a shocking turn of events, amateur photographer Sam Davis found a heron flying through midair with a snake eel hanging from its stomach. Sam actually witnessed the moment the eel burst from the bird's stomach mid-flight. He even snapped a shot of the eel dangling bewildered as the heron flew on like nothing was happening. According to Sam himself, the heron went around the water and flew about like nothing was wrong. Sam did, however, spot eagles and even a fox trailing after the bird, probably waiting for it to keel over. But how did the eel get into the heron's stomach in the first place? And how did it get free? Well, herons are notorious gluttons. The heron probably stuffed the snake eel into its belly, only to have the snake eel perform a bold escape by slicing open the heron's stomach from the inside with the tip of its tail, and then slithering its way out. The problem for the snake eel was that it did so while the heron was airborne. Unfortunately, Sam never found out if either the eel snake or the heron survived the end of the day. Number 1. Aliens in China. In 2010, an unidentified flying object was spotted in the sky above Huangshao, China. It was so terrifying that the local Shaoxian airport was forced to cease operations on July 7th. The object was first seen by a flight crew while preparing to descend at around 8:40 p.m. The flight crew notified air traffic control, the aviation authorities responded shortly after, and every outbound flight was grounded, while inbound flights were diverted to other airports. This UFO affected a total of 18 flights, according to ABC News. Normal operations started up again a few hours later, with Chinese media creating a firestorm of speculation as to what exactly the unidentified flying object was. Some thought it was a hidden United States bomber going towards China. Some thought it was an extraterrestrial from outer space, and others thought it could have been some kind of Russian satellite. Others put forth a more rational explanation, saying that the UFO was probably some kind of new aircraft or missile being tested out by the Chinese military. Pictures of the object were later released. The object appeared to be hovering in the sky, bathed in golden light and equipped with some kind of tail. Residents of the city also claimed that they witnessed red and white light spilling out of the mysterious object. To this day, nobody knows what the UFO was or why the airport shut down so quickly. Years inside of a swampy lake. There were piles of stones covering the skeletons of at least 10 people, along with ancient weapons made of stone and antlers. The workers also discovered the old bones of badger, deer, bears, and boar. 2 of the human skulls that were found were mounted on sharp stakes. This was a very creepy discovery, and thousands of years ago, the burial mound was likely a large pile of rocks rising above the water near an ancient settlement, covered in strange wooden structures, weapons, and the mounted remains of the most fearsome animals in the region. And, of course, heads on spikes. Stockholm University's Sarah Gummison explained that this archaeological site was the first example of discovering heads mounted on stakes from the Stone Age in Sweden. But the reason these people mounted heads is a little different than what you might be thinking. Forensic analysis of the skulls showed that these people had indeed suffered wounds from battle, but they had already healed. This suggests the dead people were members of the community who fought in battles and survived them. Rather than mounting the heads of their enemies, this unknown ancient civilization probably did so with the heads of their most treasured warriors. It was more of a celebrated burial than a humiliation for their enemies. Number 9. The creepy mummy. Takabuti is an ancient mummy sitting in a glass case at the Ulster Museum in Belfast. She was discovered in 1835 and has been a mystery ever since. But over 150 years after she was discovered, Egyptologist Rosalind David and her team of scientists decided to finally unlock this ancient woman's secrets using CT scans and other high-tech investigative methods. What they discovered is not only creepy, but absolutely fascinating. The initial investigation revealed that Takabuti had come to a miserable end, either from an enemy attack or a betrayal. She was between 20 and 30 when killed. Her teeth were in pretty good condition, and even today, she is exceptionally well preserved. Her features are surprisingly lifelike, and her hair is still in great shape. What's really fascinating about Takabuti is that she still had all of her hair at the time of death, which was strange in ancient Egypt because most people shaved their heads to avoid lice and wore wigs instead. Takabuti was an exception, probably because she had reddish blonde hair, which would have made her quite unusual and unique to ancient Egyptians. In the end, scans revealed that Takabuti had been stabbed in the back, likely with some kind of axe weapon. Researchers believe the weapon was probably Assyrian, and that would make sense because the Assyrians had been invading Egypt at the time of her death. But because the wound was found at the back of the woman's ribs, scientists have also speculated that she may have been literally stabbed in the back, perhaps by another member of Egyptian society. Number 8. The Maya slave ship. For the first time in history, a very disturbing discovery involving the Mayans and slavery has been discovered. The ship was originally found in 2017, but it wasn't until just recently that scientists finally discovered its true purpose. The wreckage of the ship was discovered off the coast of Mexico and was a kind of paddle wheel steamboat from Cuba. It had likely been used to carry Maya people from the Americas to Cuba, where they were then sold into slavery. The ship probably functioned between 1847 and 1901 during the War of the Cass, a time when the Mayan people, still living on the Yucatan Peninsula, rebelled against their European rulers. Slavery was illegal in Mexico by this time, but that didn't stop operators from forcing indigenous Mayans into signing work contracts and then shipping them off to Cuba, where their rights would be stripped away and they'd be treated as slaves. The Mayans were sold to a middleman for about 25 pesos, then sold again in Havana for even more, with male Mayans going for 160 pesos and women going for 120 pesos. This particular slave ship was on its way to Cuba when its boiler blew up off the coast of Sicily. It sat at the bottom of the water for over 100 years. We don't know how many Maya lost their lives on the boat, as instead of being listed as passengers, they were probably listed as cargo and undocumented. Number 7. Peruvian cat claws. Some very unique artifacts were recently discovered inside of the tomb of a nobleman in Peru. Experts were digging at the archaeological site of Huaca de la Luna when they uncovered a strange set of claws, a very creepy mask, and a scepter. The artifacts probably belonged to the forgotten Moche civilization. The claws were used as part of a costume worn by participants in a Moche combat ritual, and the claws would have been part of an outfit made from animal skin. The ritual involved two men battling, the winner receiving the claws as a prize and the loser being sacrificed to the gods. According to archaeologist Santiago Uceda, the scepter would have signified power, while a pair of earrings discovered would have symbolized status. These clues suggest the nobleman buried inside the tomb was a warrior of some renown and possibly very well respected in society. He had likely won at least one combat ritual and taken the claws as his prize. As for the Moche civilization, they date back to at least 1500 years, meaning they predate the Inca society. Their culture was centered around modern Trujillo. In 800 AD, the Moche disappeared from the history books, and nobody knows why. The society kept no written record of their exploits. Everything that we know about the Moche must be interpreted from the pottery and jewelry, weapons and armor, and other archaeological relics they left behind. What do you think about the Moche combat ritual? Is the loser being sacrificed a little harshly? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and if you're not subscribed to the channel, be sure to hit that button. Number 6. Railway skeletons. Railway work next to the Liverpool Street Station in London has unveiled thousands of ancient skeletons. Archaeologists began excavating the bones of at least 3,000 people buried between the 16th and 17th century. all of whom had been forgotten when the Crossrail transit line was built over the top of their graves. They probably came from the first ever insane asylum in the world, the nearby Bedlam Hospital. The archaeological dig is the biggest to happen in London in the past few decades, with all the decomposed skeletons needing to be carefully exhumed and then reburied elsewhere. They excavated wooden coffins filled with babies and found giant piles of bones and skulls. Scientists hope to find more information about how ancient people in London lived and about the bubonic plague that probably killed a lot of them. The cemetery first opened in 1569 to accommodate the overspill coming from the city's churchyard burial grounds. It was also the main burial grounds used for the Bedlam Hospital. Tests on the bones revealed that many of the people here died from one of the plague outbreaks that ravaged London on and off for about 200 years. It was also used to bury people during the Great Plague of 1665 that killed over 100,000 people. Number 5. Hitler's Wolf Lair. Before Hitler invaded the Soviet Union in 1941, he built a military headquarters in Eastern Europe for the base of his operations. These headquarters became known as the Wolf's Lair, and researchers in Poland have made some new and exciting discoveries at this very creepy piece of history. Exploration work was carried out by the Latroba Foundation from Gdańsk. Researchers discovered armored doors and a secret stairway leading down into Hitler's barracks, along with a special set of doors designed to protect the Führer from chemical attacks. Investigators even found some smaller items inside Hitler's bunker, like pipes and taps. But perhaps the most fascinating discovery was a stone with the engraving of Hitler's escort battalion. Investigators were able to determine exactly which barracks Hitler's special escort lived in. This wasn't a revolutionary discovery, but it's always pretty creepy to find anything new inside an old Nazi ruin, especially one hidden in the dark Polish forest. Number 4. The 30 Years' War. In 2011, archaeologists found a massive graveyard that contained at least 175 bodies dating back to the legendary Battle of Lutzen. This battle was between the Protestant forces of Sweden, led by King Gustav II Adolf, and a Catholic army led by Albrecht von Wallenstein of Czech. It was one of the bloodiest battles in the 30 Years' War, with an estimated 9,000 deaths, including the King of Sweden. But what's really strange is that no bodies were ever found, even though the battle went down as recently as 1632. Archaeologists excavated a huge portion of the battlefield and found thousands of amazing relics, but they never found any human remains. Not until 2011, when they finally discovered a single mass grave left over from the battle. It's believed that the dead were removed from the battlefield by the residents of Lutzen, and then buried carefully at the sides of the road. Archaeologists now believe there are probably dozens of hidden mass graves all throughout the area, all of them still undiscovered. As for the battle itself, it was a Protestant victory. They stopped the advancing Catholics despite suffering huge losses. The place where King Gustav II Adolf got cut down was marked with a huge boulder the day after. The rock is still there in the field today. Number 3. The oldest worm. An extremely creepy creature that lived 555 million years ago has been discovered as the first ancestor on a family tree that contains just about every animal on Earth today, including humans. The ultimate ancestor is a fat purple worm and the earliest bilaterian ever. The specimen was discovered by geologists from UC Riverside. Bilaterian means an organism with a front and a back, two perfectly symmetrical sides, and an opening at each end connected by a gut. Basically, a worm. This particular worm is named Icaria wariotia, and its development was the first step in complex life on our planet. You might be wondering, what about multicellular organisms like sponges? These were definitely around first, but they aren't actually related to animals like monkeys or humans. They lack mouths and guts. The sponges of millions of years ago are very similar to the sponges of the day. It was the first bilaterian worm that pushed evolution forward. It was the first organism that was able to move, and the first organism with a gut and a rudimentary mouth. As the worm evolved, it gave organisms the opportunity to organize their bodies in different ways. Millions of years later, the creepy little worm evolved into, well, basically everything. Number 2. The impaled skull of Phineas Gage. One of the creepiest and most famous skulls in the entire world is the impaled skull of Phineas Gage. On September 13, 1848, Phineas was blasting rock in Vermont. Phineas filled a hole with blasting powder before covering it with dirt and clay and pounding everything into the hole using an old tool known as a tamping iron. It was basically an iron rod almost 4 feet or 1.2 meters long. While doing this, Phineas accidentally created a spark with the iron and the rock, exploding the ingredients he just stuffed into the hole. The giant rod then exploded into his face, shooting through his left jaw and sprouting through his cheek, narrowly missing his eye, then blowing out the backside of his brain. Phineas Gage was a little shocked by what happened. He sat down, had a bit of a think, then got up and walked to the local doctor. He was totally fine. The iron rod shot through him and went out the other side, somehow missing everything important. Phineas Gage would go on to live for 12 long years after this incident, until the age of 36. He died in 1860, at which point Harvard Medical School took his skull and put it in their museum. The skull may not have been found by any archaeological means, but it's still pretty creepy. It's sitting inside of a glass case, along with the iron rod, on the 5th floor of Harvard's medical school, in the Warren Anatomical Museum. Number 1. Medieval lepers. When researchers began to excavate the medieval site of the St. Mary Magdalene Hospital Cemetery in England, they were hoping to genotype a certain strain of leprosy. There's no medieval disease worse than leprosy, and researchers wanted to figure out where the disease came from and how it evolved into one of the worst epidemics in the Middle Ages. Researchers found skeletons covered in leprosy lesions. Among these skeletons was one that scientists found particularly compelling. The skeleton belonged to a young man who traveled a very far distance to die. DNA evidence showed that the pilgrim came from as far away as Africa to be treated in the earliest leprosy hospital in Western Europe, where he, of course, died. According to the same study, researchers were able to determine that the bacteria which causes leprosy has barely changed in the past few hundred years, which logically explains why the disease more or less vanished after peaking in medieval Europe. Everyone became resistant to the disease. But don't let these ancient skeletons fool you. Leprosy is still around today. Of course, the disease doesn't happen very often. It's also curable with drug therapy. Way back in 2000, the WHO declared leprosy is no longer a public health problem. This means there is less than 1 case in 10,000 people. Ignorant deaths in recent memory. It definitely could have been avoided. The young man was listening to music in his earbuds while crossing the train tracks near 60th Avenue. Rather than looking both ways to see if a train was coming, the guy just kept on trucking. He walked right in front of the speeding train and probably didn't even hear it because of his blaring music until it literally smashed him to pieces. According to CBC News, the young man died instantly. He didn't hear the train blowing its horn, he didn't see the train trying to slow down, and in the end, he probably only saw a sudden spark of light and then nothing at all. Even more horrifying is that the incident was witnessed by quite a few bystanders. The Edmonton city manager had to let everyone know that support services would be available for witnesses who were having a tough time with witnessing a man be blown into 1,000 pieces by a speeding train. Number 9. The Last Laugh. In Texas, a man was killed by an angry alligator. And while this isn't exactly a dumb way to die, the way in which it all unfolded was certainly stupid. The man had actually been mocking the alligators. The guy thought he was hot stuff. According to the report from CNN, the man mocked the alligators, ignored the warning signs, then jumped into the water with the savage reptiles. Police were called early on Friday morning when witnesses saw Tommy Woodward and an unidentified woman swimming together in the bayou with alligators. Witnesses then saw one of the big alligators that the man had been taunting take a big bite out of him. The woman managed to get away and escape, and Tommy Woodward's body was found several hours later. The really dumb part about this isn't exactly the mocking. The stupidest part was that the guy ignored the signs that explicitly warned no swimming with the alligators. In the end, the alligators got the last laugh. Would you dare swim with alligators? Hopefully not after what I just told you. Number 8. Death by licorice. A perfectly healthy man, only 54 years old and with every reason to live, collapsed dead from a heart attack. This isn't completely out of the ordinary, except that after his death, doctors discovered that it was all because of black licorice. According to a case study published recently in the New England Journal of Medicine, the man was a construction worker from Massachusetts who ate between 1 and 2 bags of black licorice every day for 3 full weeks. Then, while eating lunch one day, he collapsed out of nowhere. Do you eat black licorice? My dad loves it, but he doesn't eat it that often. I don't know of anyone else who eats it though. Kind of old-fashioned, right? Anyways, emergency workers tried to perform CPR to save the man's life, but he died within 24 hours of arriving at the Massachusetts General Hospital. The man had a very low level of potassium, which caused issues with his heart rhythm. Plus, the guy had a pretty poor diet and smoked a pack per day. In the end, it turned out that smoking and a poor diet weren't the only 2 factors in play. The guy's potassium levels had dropped and led to his cardiac arrest because of something known as glyceric acid inside of black licorice. They should really put a public health warning on these things. Number 7. Gender reveal explosion. An expecting father is dead after a gender reveal device went terribly, terribly wrong. Everyone wants to make the most out of every moment and to turn ordinary events into something spectacular. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But Christopher Peckney, 28 years old, is probably regretting his big gender reveal showcase after a device he was building in his New York State garage exploded and killed him, also injuring his younger brother. Christopher was expecting his first child. The device he was building was to explode in a perfectly safe way, revealing the gender of the baby to his friends and family. Christopher was a pretty mechanically inclined guy. His brother referred to the explosion as a freak accident that no one could have imagined. The police bomb squad investigated Christopher's home, but did not immediately reveal why the device exploded or what kinds of materials were involved. What the heck do you think he did? How did this even happen? Let me know in the comments below. And make sure to subscribe if you haven't already. We have lots more videos like this coming up. And let me know what you think the most embarrassing way to die would be. This next one might be on your list. Number 6. Illegal butt injection. A woman from Philadelphia named Leslie Ayala recently perished after receiving an illegal butt injection. It was technically an illegal buttocks injection, but either way, it killed her. Leslie received the illegal injection from a woman who had already been jailed for giving what the New York Daily News described as back alley butt enhancement jobs. The bogus butt doctor was in the room with Leslie when she suffered a sudden cardiac arrest and fell dead. It wasn't directly after the injection, but while she was recovering from it. A spokeswoman for the medical examiner said that Leslie died because of systemic silicone embolism syndrome, brought on by cosmetic silicone injections into her thighs and buttocks. And yeah, it kind of makes sense that she died from the procedure, considering the woman responsible for giving her the injection already went to prison twice for performing the botched procedures that she would often finish by closing wounds with crazy glue. Number 5. Virtual reality mishap. A man in Moscow recently died from virtual reality. He didn't die in the game and then die in real life. Instead, he suffered deadly wounds after wandering around his apartment wearing virtual reality goggles. The poor man was discovered dead in his apartment, covered in glass and soaked in blood. According to the preliminary investigation, the man was moving around in his apartment with the goggles on his face when he tripped, fell onto his glass table, and then bled out on the floor. This is the first officially reported death directly caused by virtual reality. Of course, it wasn't the fault of the virtual reality hardware. It was the man's own fault for wandering around in his apartment blind and crashing into a glass table. But still, this is probably only the first in what will become an increasingly popular way to accidentally die. Number 4. Too much work. A woman in Japan worked 159 hours of overtime in a single month and then died because of it. Misa Sato, a hard-working political journalist, died from heart failure because of way too much work. This woman was employed by the national broadcaster of the country. In the 30 days leading up to her death, she had only taken 2 days off. She was so dedicated to her job and so hell-bent on being seen as a valued member of the staff that she literally worked herself to death. Now, it's hard to say if this was a dumb death or, quite honestly, just a sad death. According to The Independent, roughly 2,000 people every year die in Japan because of work-related stress. There have been recent calls to change the work culture of Japan, because employees often work over 100 hours of overtime a month. As we can see with Misa Sato's sudden heart failure, this kind of productivity is beyond stupid. It's hard to be a productive member of the team when you're lying in a morgue. Number 3. Killed by his own invention. Francis Edgar Stanley created a steam-powered car known as the Stanley Steamer. He did this in Massachusetts and was on his way to becoming one of the greatest inventors in early automobile history. He created the earliest model of the Stanley Steamer in 1898 with his brother. 20 years later, on July 31st, 1918, Stanley was motoring around the town in the very car that he had invented. Francis Stanley was pushing his steamer to its limits when he hit a woodpile, flipped over, and then died from his wounds while being carried to the hospital. Stanley was killed in his very own invention. Back in the day, the Stanley Steamer was one of the fastest and most reliable cars available. The steamer had been developed as a possible alternative to the internal combustion motor. The Stanley Motor Carriage Company was the most successful United States automotive manufacturer when Stanley died. But maybe his death was a blessing in disguise. Stanley never lived to witness Ford's Model T and its internal combustion engine outsell and ultimately overtake every steam-powered automobile. Still, pretty embarrassing to be killed by your own invention. Number 2. Too much water. A 40-year-old woman from Huddersfield named Jacqueline Henson wanted to lose a few pounds. She went on a meal replacement diet plan. This diet plan involved eating 500 calories a day for approximately 12 weeks by replacing all solid meals with things like shakes and soups. It also involved drinking water. During the first week, Jacqueline lost over 10 pounds. A little while after, Jacqueline died from brain swelling. So, what went wrong? Jacqueline didn't realize that a person can drink way too much water. She thought water was a healthy part of her diet, so she drank about 4 liters of water while watching television in one sitting. After drinking all that water, she complained that her stomach hurt. She later got sick, she came down with a brutal headache, and she died in the hospital the next day. All that water killed her. Nobody should be drinking that much water in a single sitting. It's known as water intoxication. Too much water in a short period of time fills your blood with water, dilutes the sodium and electrolytes in your blood, and ultimately disrupts your brain function. This is what causes the brain to swell, and this is what killed Jacqueline Henson. Number 1. Attack of the Rooster. A man in India was recently killed by a rooster. If you've ever seen a rooster in real life, you'll know these birds are pretty terrifying. You'll also know that they're small and easy to kick. Nobody should ever die from a rooster attack. Quite frankly, it's embarrassing. And yet, this unnamed victim was killed after he fitted a knife onto his rooster in preparation for an illegal cockfight in the south of India. Instead of attacking its opponent, the rooster stabbed the man in the groin with the knife fixed to its leg as it tried to escape. The guy died from blood loss before he could even get to a hospital. Some might say this was natural karma. Whatever your take, it was a pretty dumb way to go. The man was one of 16 who organized the cockfight where the accident took place. Local authorities were trying to hunt down the other organizers, with some suggesting all 15 of them should face charges of manslaughter for what happened to the dead fella, along with charges of illegal betting and hosting a cockfight. What dumb ways are you afraid to die? Let me know in the comments, and thank you for watching. Be sure to hit the subscribe button if you haven't already, and come back soon for another amazing video.